right, it is good to be with you tonight. I hope that everybody is doing well. I'm just coming off the heels of a vacation. I was in Colorado for about 8 nights, something like that. Very nice, Estes Park and Colorado Springs, Rocky Mountain National Park, and we could do a whole separate video on that. It would be awesome. Well, it would be for me, but it might be a little boring if, just seeing a lot of pictures of mountains and waterfalls and wildlife and breathtaking views, what have you, etc., etc. But enough of that. So what we would like to talk about tonight is I came across a guitar here recently. Actually, it's probably been, a couple of months, a few months maybe. There's a lady that I work with, I should say works at the same place that I do. We don't necessarily work together a lot. I'm more in a support role for her, I guess, so I guess we do. But anyway, she was like cleaning out her house, her and her husband, and I guess she bought like a guitar or a couple of guitars or something for one of her children and one of her kids here a while back and many years ago, and I guess they really never took to it too much. So she's like, hey, we're either going to throw this stuff away or do you want it? And I was like, well, what do you have? And she's, I have a little amp. I have a couple of stands. And I'm like, I'll take the stands or the amp. No, it was some little, 6-inch whatever. No, I don't need that. The place is cluttered, as you can see, too much anyway. She said, so I'll send you a picture. And she sent me a picture of this guitar. And I was like, well, isn't that interesting? I said, well, are you sure you don't want me to give you some money for it? I said, that's not exactly bottom of the barrel, nor is it top of the line by any stretch, but I wanted to be fair. And she's like, no, she said, I don't want to mess with it, so you can take it. And I said, okay, great. And it was this. And this being a Westone Spectrum St, which I'm assuming stands for Strat. Now, what was interesting about this acquisition is there's a little bit of somewhat of a backstory that kind of goes with this particular brand. Back when I was really kind of first starting out, we did talk about the first Strat that I had, but I didn't buy that until the 90s, and I started playing in 81. But anyway, before I had the BC Rich guitar, which I loved, I was playing my former brother-in-law's guitar, and Jeff, if you're watching, appreciate you so much. Really appreciate all of the time, support, and investment that you made in me as far as in my early musical experience. I really do appreciate it. But anyway, he had a Electra Westone Phoenix, I believe it was, and it was green, and I thought it had a graphite neck, but it was actually it was black, I believe, on the back and a rosewood fretboard, much like this, and it looked a lot like this, but I believe it was a Phoenix. And so as I went to the information superhighway to try to gather the information here so I could, at least appear that I know what I'm talking about, which is a stretch, it appears that the Westone guitars, they were made in Matsumoku, Japan, and I think the impression that I have or that I've heard over the years, if there was something that was made in Japan, that typically the quality was very nice, and in particular the guitars were very nice. I believe, did Fender maybe make some guitars in Japan for a while? I don't know, I'm a mess. I think they did. I think maybe one of the Ingve Strats was made in Japan. I don't know, you can fact check me on that. We don't want to be guilty of dis or misinformation. Anyway, the Westone guitars were made in Japan from like the late 70s up really through the mid to later 80s. And what happened exactly was there was a company called the St. Louis Music Company, I believe, that owned Electra. And so they started, I think they bought Westone and started to distribute them in the U.S. through St. Louis Music. And for a year in 1984, I believe it was considered the Electra Westone. And that was one of those that I played that was my brother-in-law's. It was the Phoenix. If I can find a picture, I'll show it. And so I know I was always under the impression, it's like, this isn't a Westone. I thought this was Electra because it just looks just like it. And I remember the logo and everything. Well, it turns out it was Electra, which was owned by this St. Louis Music Company, was distributing them, purchased them, and was selling them under the moniker of the Electra Westone in 1984. And then they dropped the Electra brand imprint on them in 85 and 86, and I think maybe 87, and they were just Westone. And so this particular one, which is the Spectrum, or the X135 or whatever, Spectrum ST, forget exactly the exact model number, but I believe they made these in, I want to say 85, 86, I think 87, and then I believe in my readings that they no longer appeared in the 1988 catalog. And then at that point, there was some gear shifting, and they stopped manufacturing them in Japan and moved the manufacturing to Korea. And then I believe they kind of ditched the whole Westone name and kind of put it all under the umbrella of Alvarez, as far as what I've read. Anyway, Patty was nice enough to give me this guitar, and I don't know if you can really see, but this thing is pretty beat up. There's a lot of scuffs and scratches. I don't know if those are going to buff out at all. The dust around the pickups is thick. And I think the strings, I want to go with, these are like a 6 billion gauge, because I'm used to 7s. These just feel like some type of a cable that's running across the ocean floor for me. They're pretty robust. It's very hard for me to play. So what we want to do is restring this thing with some 7s, of course. And now, having said that, you know, the strings are pretty much a heavy gauge, this thing seems to play really good and isn't buzzing out or anything. So we're going to restring it, clean it up a little bit. It does have this kind of little tremolo thing. The bridge is just extremely unique. The saddles are crazy looking. It does have these Magnaflux unbalanced humbuckers. And so they have a coil tap or a coil split here. But what's unique about them, is my understanding, is the output of one of the coils on the humbucker is substantially hotter than the other one. So when it goes to the single coil, it goes to the higher output single coil, thus doesn't really drop off the volume a lot. And I guess we're going to find that out. So anyway, and I guess people used to kind of rant and rave and say that they had a bit of a unique sound. We're going to find out, but we're going to clean it up. We're going to restring it. It's going to be an interesting little venture here, and it even has the Westone logo on the back of the machine heads. Very cool. And actually, I think it's kind of a cool looking guitar. It's kind of a cross between, almost like, that big stupid shadow, it's almost like a cross between a SG and a Strat. It seems real SG-ish here and real Strat-ish right here. So anyway, like I said, we're going to clean it up, restring it, come back, play through our little generic tone that we always have, and see what it sounds like. Be back in a minute. All right, just a few quick closing thoughts on the Westone. This thing plays amazing. The action is awesome. It plays like butter. Action is low, but yet it still has somewhat of a spongy feel to it. I think the tone of it is pretty cool. It does get a little bit chirpy. I don't know if that's something else going on or the pickups or whatever, but actually I could kind of live with that. It makes it kind of cut a little bit more in my book, but this thing's great. If you get a chance, if you come across one, I would highly recommend you pick one up. You can probably get one relatively cheap. I would say probably a couple of $100, maybe a little bit more. I would say that it's worth it. I think the craftsmanship, I think the build quality is awesome. This one is a little bit scratched up, but it gives it personality, it gives it character. You might think that it sounds horrible, fair enough, and that could also be the player, which is me, because I don't really play that much anymore, and I don't really practice. I just kind of, noodle around a little bit, as I'm sure that it's obvious. But anyway, I hope that you enjoy. And one more thing, this thing does scream on that 15th fret in that E blues position. It's just nasty. So let's just hear that one more time. See if we can pull it off. One more time.